Yeah,
I hit it like as you were saying that, right seconds before. Have you guys ever heard of a guy by the name of David Hill, David_Hill 99?
Yes.
You have? How do you know him?
From Twitter.
Oh, what about him though?
Nothing.
Apparently, he's a big salary cap guy.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Salary Captain podcast?
No.
That's a new one, I think, because I just came across my feed today.
Oh, okay.
I think it's relatively new anyway, I'm pretty sure.
Well, he has been incredibly nice to me today. And
want you on the pod?
Well, yeah, and I just don't know if it's like a new thing or I was going to dig into it after the podcast tonight.
Just do it.
Well, I'll probably do it just because I love talking about that stuff. But I went through the feed and it didn't look like they've recorded it does say episode 8 on that one. So they got 8 episodes. Kyle Holden was on it.
Hey.
There
Kyle
you go.
Holden.
Just joking.
Oh, okay. Anyway. You guys ready or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Let's record in 3, 2, 1, record.
Are we doing the mock draft?
Oh my God. We should probably talk about what we're going to record. I'll just start something and you guys roll with it and we'll switch back and forth throughout the episode.
You'll make your first pick now. I'll make mine in like 15 minutes in between topics.
So no, I wasn't planning on doing the mock draft.
Fine, then.
I'm willing to change my mind, though, if you want me to.
Now, I have notes for every AFC team.
Okay, good.
Wow.
Me too.
I don't. I have no notes for none of it.
Oh, I even typed mine.
And their draft picks. I have all their draft picks listed.
Holy smokes.
Me too, man. Well done.
In case you guys are interested, I shared a spreadsheet with you guys that has the Brugler mock already set up on it.
Oh, good. Well, that's going to be worthless in 2 weeks when we record that episode.
Well,
okay, let's stop this so Aaron doesn't have to.
Right, we're killing it.
Are we starting over?
Kill that, yeah.
All right.
Aaron shouldn't have to listen to a minute and a half of that. Elite.
That was so smooth, too.
Thank you. Oh.
Dan, did you listen to my podcast with Evan Silva?
No. Should I tomorrow?
I'll listen to it tomorrow.
Y'all are the worst. The worst friends.
Well, I don't even subscribe to that show anymore. There's too many podcasts. Like that's the one that
why
got cut out.
Tell me why it's important.
I'm just joking. It's not important.
Oh, okay. I was like,
although I was kind of nervous to do that one.
Really?
Oh, you should.
Ross Tucker? Yeah, I was kind of nervous.
Haven't you been on this show before?
No. How many listeners do you think they have?
I don't know. I'm one of them.
8,000 to 10,000.
No way.
Oh
What?
my gosh. Yeah,
I have no idea. I'm just throwing numbers out. You think more or less?
I bet
way
they have
more.
50,000.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I was gonna say at least 30,000.
He does have that. I stopped listening when he opened the Tuckheads thing. I don't know if you guys know anything about that.
Ago.
I know that's kind of when I stopped because I was like, really, you're going to charge people the same price as Netflix to like hang out on a message board? So I was kind of done.
Well, I mean, he's clearly in it for the money.
I mean, sure, of course,
Um,
it's his full time
Yeah,
job.
but
I mean, he also doesn't say anything on the pod. I mean, it's Silva's pod.
Yeah. He does more on like the regular Ross Tucker pod and like he has the betting one and
Yeah, I don't listen to
other
any
ones.
of those.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
I just got a little nervous.
I was a little bit nervous
I'm gonna
when I
listen.
came on Blueprint, so I get it.
You don't have to be nervous.
For Blueprint?
Thanks, Dan.
Oh, I mean, yeah, for Blueprint. That didn't come across
That
correctly.
trash.
Yeah, my point was you talk to Ryan all the time. It's like,
I think that was pretty early on Ryan being on the show, though, and also
Oh, okay.
Williamson used to be on Tucker's pod, so
That's true. I mean,
he was a big timer.
he was on that path.
Yeah, is still for sure.
Do you see he went to 4 for 4?
I did see that.
Yeah,
Not exclusively, I assume, though. He seems like he has his hand in a million different things.
no, it sounded exclusive, didn't it?
So he's not doing like that. What was it? Place 60, whatever that one was he was doing. Locked on for the Steelers or whatever.
He's still doing He's still doing all those pods.
Yeah, but I think
He wasn't
content-wise-
doing Dynasty content anywhere though.
Yeah,
I thought he had like signed on to Football Guys or something at one point.
He did, but that was like a year ago and it went nowhere. This will probably go nowhere too.
does he not like to produce content or what?
I think he just is kind of streaky with it.
Oh,
Like he'll write 3 or 4 articles in 2 weeks and then nothing for 2 months. A lot of people are like that though.
Sounds like me.
Sounds like Dan.
But I mean, if I had
I write, I just don't submit them.
if I had a full-time gig, I would definitely be obviously doing it more.
That's not normal, Ryan. To write the article and just I won't submit that one.
Are you guilty of that, Dan?
But I have articles that I've written like years ago. No joke.
Not
And just never submitted them. Not really what I wanted to do or whatever.
Just decide you didn't like it.
Or didn't finish it was the most thing. That happens all the time. I have lists and lists of half-written articles. Oh my gosh. I have so many half-written or one paragraph. But I even edited and finished a series of 3 articles about auctions like a year and a half ago and was going to send it. And I'm like, I'll read it again tomorrow, make sure it's good, and just never did it.
Damn.
So now I'm writing a salary cap series. I'm on the 5th article, and I used a bunch of that stuff that I wrote to help with this, though.
Nice.
So that's something. Let's record this thing. Record in 3, 2, 1, record.
I was like a second behind. That's okay.
You're welcome.
Count us down again. Or
Are you
something.
serious?
Dang it. Okay, I killed
Or
mine.
just start from here. I don't care either way.
Nope, I killed mine already.
All right, delete.
It wasn't on my screen.
We are off
I'm
to
ready.
a blazing
100%.
pace here.
Only 45 minutes late. I'm ready. 100%.
Wait, I can't hear Matt.
By the time
Shut up,
this
Ryan.
thing ends, by the time we get this thing recorded, the national championship game is going to be over. 3, 2, 1, record. Welcome to the latest edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am at the reins again this week. I'm Dan Myler, and with me, as always, my 2 good friends, Matt Price and Ryan McDowell. We've had a lot of draft talk over the last handful of weeks, fellas, and we're going to kind of shift gears slightly, I guess, and talk more about the team perspectives, needs and fits. We'll go through the depth charts of all the teams over the next couple of weeks and try to pinpoint some of our favorite landing spots for these rookies, or at least the big time rookies, guys. Let's get right into it. I guess we're going to start with the AFC. We'll do the NFC teams next week, and we're going to start in the AFC East since our champions were out of the AFC East, the New England Patriots. Ryan, I guess we'll start with you. Overall thoughts on the Patriots? There's the obvious, from a dynasty perspective, we'd all like to see one of these big time tight ends end up in New England, especially with one of those first round picks. Your thoughts just in general on the depth chart and what you'd like to see them do from a dynasty owner's perspective.
It's just such a weird roster because they've obviously had very high levels of success for the past 2 decades, basically. But when you look at this roster, especially those 4 positions we care the most about, it's pretty ugly from a dynasty perspective. They have no tight end at this point after the Gronkowski retirement. We know what we're getting with Tom Brady, and it's really just the countdown of how much longer does he have, not only as a top producer from a fantasy perspective, but in the league at all. And then wide receiver is maybe worse than it's been in years, and it's been pretty bad from time to time for them. They essentially only have Julian Edelman left. So, I mean, when I think about their team needs, I think it's probably time they start thinking about a backup quarterback, whether that's the heir apparent to Brady or just a reliable backup moving forward. They have needs at wide receiver, and then the obvious need at tight end. I do think they're finally set, at least for the next couple of years, at the running back position. So probably like most dynasty owners, I'm most anxious to see who they draft at tight end, and but also wide receiver. I think they really need a big wide receiver with Edelman, Dorsett already there, and there's a lot of big-bodied wideouts in this class. So they're going to have plenty of options. They've got that late first rounder. They have 2 second rounders. They have 3 third rounders. They've got some ammo to get a tight end and a receiver on those first 2 days.
Yeah, but the thing, and Matt will bring you in here, the thing with the Patriots has been, first of all, their history of drafting wide receivers, especially high in the draft, has not gone well in the Bill Belichick era. You know, really, it's a challenge to even think of a couple guys that have really panned out, especially with the Patriots. So, you know, looking towards that position, you at least raise an eyebrow to what kind of potential we could get there. And then with that big gaping hole at tight end and the need at quarterback, or at least a developmental quarterback, there's so many potential fills or potential picks that we could see the Patriots add that you know would affect us in dynasty, that it's easy to forget that Bill Belichick doesn't always do it that way, and he values those pass rushers and the defensive backs and the offensive linemen and all the other positions, so he's going to fill those needs as well. There's a really good chance, Matt, that we're all just disappointed and they maybe don't take a guy in those first few picks in the first couple of rounds.
Well, I mean, you guys are doing a huge disservice to guys like Philip Dorsett and Maurice Harris. They just brought in Bruce Ellington. They got Braxton Berrios there. I mean, come on, guys. This
household names.
Yeah, household names. And at tight end, they brought in Matt Lacoste and Steven Anderson. It was great at Cal, you know, disappointed at Houston. Jacob Hollister. No, these are the 2 positions. I think Ryan nailed it. Running back is set with Michelle and of course James White. I think Burkhead will come back healthy and contribute a little bit there. But it's disgusting. You don't really want any of these guys. I guess if you're a contender, I think Julie Edelman is a decent buy, I guess, for a late second, early third round, something like that, if you can get somebody to sell them for that. But draft capital wise, it's got to be wide receiver and tight end here, at least on the offensive side. In terms of the quarterback position, I think you could see them go there in the 3rd round. I don't think you're going to see a first or maybe even a 2nd round pick there from them. Maybe somebody like Will Grier, I think would be an interesting fit. You know, you have that aggressive quarterback who's pretty accurate, not the biggest of arms. Does it sound like Brady to anyone? I think he could probably do pretty well throwing to guys like James White and Bruce Ellington. So maybe that's where they go at the quarterback position. But Ryan, and you also, Dan, are certainly right that wide receiver and tight end seem like the biggest needs right now, especially if Brady is going to actually play till 45. Then they'll just take whoever is who's left over next year in the 2020 draft.
So quick question, quick answer, guys. If they pick a wide receiver in the 1st round, does that guy's value go drastically up?
I think it depends on where relative to where everybody else goes. You know, I think if that's the best landing spot of if like in Brugler's latest mock where Harry goes to the Jaguars and Butler goes to the Panthers, and you know some of these landing spots that don't look as good, then I think it's possible if the Patriots took somebody in the 1st round that their value would increase. Like if they got AJ Brown, for example, I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's enough poor landing spots for the wide receivers that Yeah, landing in New England, I would certainly consider a good one. So yeah, I think that would be a value gain for that player.
Let's go to the Miami Dolphins. New coach, new quarterback. It seems like almost knew everything down there in Miami. Certainly going to be a rebuild mode here for the Dolphins, Matt. Needs all the way around, really, maybe with the exception of tight end with Mike Gesicki already in place. They've also brought in Dwayne Allen. But you could see somebody fitting in at all three of the other positions, quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. What are your dynasty thoughts here with the Dolphins?
It's just messy. I mean, on paper, it feels like they have enough guys at each position with Parker and Stills and Wilson, if he's healthy. Leonte Carew still sticking around. I mean, they have guys, right? They just don't have any guys that we're excited about for fantasy. So I don't know if them as an organization sees that as a big need. Obviously, the same with tight end. And then, you have to think they're going to want to take a quarterback at some point. But I could definitely see them like feeling okay with at where they're at running back and wide receiver and loading up maybe at on the defensive side this draft. So I don't have a good grasp on this team at all. Other than what they want to do at the quarterback position. They just drafted Balaj last year, Kenyon Drake, whatever you want to say about him, but they have these guys at the other position that are under contract and that they're familiar with. So it seems like a tough spot for a rookie to break through unless they really spend a premium position or a premium draft pick on one of the wide receivers.
Ryan, there's all those rumblings out of Miami that they're going to wait until Tua or wait until next year to go after the quarterback. Let Ryan Fitzpatrick man the ship this year. They pick at 13 in the first round. What are your hopes as a dynasty owner? Would you rather they just ignore the positions we care about?
My hopes are that I don't have any Dolphins on my dynasty rosters. That's my hopes. This screams, everything they've done this offseason screams that they're looking towards 2020, and I don't really blame them. I mean, they have below average running backs and wide receivers, below average quarterback. I still like Mike Gesicki as a guy to buy in dynasty, but not because I want to use him in 2019, only for his future. I don't really think they will take a quarterback. I believe that narrative that they will wait until 2020, and they're probably just as happy to lose every single game this upcoming season. So I expect the offense to be really bad. That tells me I don't want much Kenyon Drake. Maybe Fitzpatrick, they're going to throw the ball around a lot. I certainly expect them to be behind in most games. So, if you want to take a shot on Kenny Stills or Albert Wilson, yeah, maybe, but really none of these guys have much dynasty value.
When you said Fitzpatrick there, I assume you meant Minkah Fitzpatrick because he's going to be on the field all the time, and maybe he can get some IDP value for our IDP players. Let's go up north to Buffalo and talk a little bit about the Bills. They got pretty much a pick in every round, with the exception of the 4th and 5th round where they have an extra pick, and pick 9th overall. There is some talk that perhaps the Bills could add a tight end, maybe a running back relatively early in the draft. And, with that core already in place, Josh Allen there, they added a couple of receivers, maybe not the big names that could have landed there, but certainly guys that could make some plays, especially with Allen's big arm. Still have the holdover with LaShawn McCoy and then the addition of Frank Gore. Are we excited about this landing spot, Ryan, for any of the positions that they could go to, especially running back and tight end?
I wouldn't say we're too excited. I think there's still enough questions about Josh Allen as a quarterback that I'm not going to be excited certainly about pass catchers landing in Buffalo. But this Bills team, really the past 2 seasons, has just continued to outperform expectations. And you really have to be impressed with the coaching staff and what they've done to build this team. It sounds crazy when you look at this roster, because kind of like Miami, they really don't have many players that have dynasty value, but whether it's defense or whatever it is, they they have found a way to win more games than anybody really expected them to. So I'm kind of thinking we'll see the same thing again. I don't think they'll take a running back early. I think that's another spot where they're probably happy to wait until 2020 or just take a late round guy to play there behind McCoy and Frank Gore.
I disagree a little bit. Running back, I definitely agree with. I don't think they're going there early, but I think they could take receiver early. They have precedent before when they took Watkins. This seems like a decent spot for Metcalf if he's going to go super early with that big arm quarterback, and they really don't have any other receiver on the roster with his size. I guess you can argue speed with Foster and Brown, but no real playmakers on that receiving game. So if DK landed there, I would actually him land there than someplace like Washington, for example. So I don't mind Metcalf there. Tight end, I think, is definitely an option. They did just bring in Tyler Kroft, if that's worth anything to you. But I think if they're going to go skill position, it's going to be wide receiver or tight end.
It's hard to see a wide receiver, even if it's Metcalf early in the first, or if they were to trade back or anything, get one of these other guys. It's hard to get excited about the landing spot. I know Josh Allen has the big arm, but they already added the speedster with John Brown, added the guy underneath with Cole Beasley. It seems to me like they
don't think
they wanted to do there.
You don't think DK would take over that role immediately from those guys? Maybe not Brown, but I think those other three. I think.
Yeah, I think my point was, he'll have the role, but are we gonna get excited about that to the point that DK's value skyrockets in Dynasty immediately or anything like that? It doesn't necessarily do that with Buffalo.
No, I think more so than these other spots, though. Like, name another bad team that he's a better fit on. I mean, I know I'm asking you guys, putting you guys on the spot there, but if there's another like quote unquote bad team that we would be more excited about than Buffalo, certainly not Miami. And Washington, I think is out too for me. So just curious if you guys have any thoughts there, I guess, if there's a better bad team for him to go to.
I don't think it's so much of a bad team as just a bad quarterback or at least questions about the quarterback.
And there are better landing spots where you'd feel better, especially high in the draft. San Francisco picks second. I know that's pretty high compared to where we see him in mocks, but there's always the trade down scenarios. I'd rather see him with the Jets at 3. They could use a downfield threat like DK would offer him. Tampa Bay would be a dream scenario. You'd love to see that. There's already obviously wide receivers in place there, and you'd get a little bit of a Mike Williams effect with a stud already there and some other playmakers. So I think the list kind of goes on and on. I don't know if Buffalo is the place I'd like to see a wide receiver.
Well, going back to your question with the Patriots, if they choose a wide receiver in the first round or second round, does that player gain value? And I think we decided yes. With Buffalo, that player is going to lose value. With Baltimore, that player is going to lose value. Whoever it is, if it's Metcalf or Harry or whoever it might be.
Yeah, and it might not be drastic. Some of these guys that we expect to go between 2 and 5 in our mocks right now might suddenly be between 4 and 7 or something like that. But I think there's enough question marks in Buffalo to make us think that wouldn't be an ideal spot, especially at wide receiver. Let's go to the Jets, the final team in the AFC East. Sam Darnold, of course. They also brought in Le'Veon Bell. The wide receiver core still has some question marks, despite adding Jamison Crowder. They have Anderson and Enunwa in place. Chris Herndon seems to be entrenched at tight end. Another spot with the potential to add a playmaker, probably not at running back, obviously, with Le'Veon Bell there. It'd have to be at wide receiver, Matt.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be one of these bigger guys because you got Robbie Anderson for the speed. You got Crowder underneath. I don't know what the heck Enunwa was going to do if he's not playing the slot, to be honest with you. So there's definitely room for one of these bigger speed guys like DK, like we just talked about, or really any of these top guys. Maybe not necessarily AJ Brown there because Crowder's in the slot, although I think pretty easily Brown would take that job, but why double up at that kind of slot position? And I do think Brown can play outside, but maybe not the best spot for him there for the Jets. But another one of these guys we talk about, Harry, I guess, be okay there. Hakeem Butler might be fun there. So yeah, I think you're right. The wide receiver is the only real position of need, I think, from a skill-based position. So from a skill-based standpoint, so they might be looking at a lot of defensive players for the Jets draft, I think.
And I've been on record saying I like Sam Darnold, and I think he has the chance to develop into a very useful fantasy quarterback for all of us, but he needs those weapons. The addition of Bell was a very nice add. Obviously, Herndon, he has the chance to become a playmaker for them, but there is some need at wide receiver, Ryan. They're picking very high in the draft again at 3rd overall. They don't have a 2nd-round pick, so there's always the chance that perhaps they move down a few picks to add a 2nd-rounder, and that brings in some of those other names that we've already talked about, maybe Metcalf, maybe some of these others. How excited would you be with a receiver landing in New York with the Jets?
Still not a spot I'm, again, necessarily excited about. I think it could just be very little value change. If one of these top receivers were to land in New York, if it's these top guys, then I think they could pretty quickly move up the depth chart. But we talked about the guys they have there, and they all have had some levels of success. So I don't think even a rookie like Harry or Metcalf is just going to go in and automatically be the top target for that offense.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, and again, going back to the picks, they have been rumored to be looking to trade down from 3, but if they don't move, they're certainly not taking a receiver at 3. And then, as you mentioned, they don't pick again until the 3rd round. They've got 2 picks in the 3rd. So that eliminates guys like Metcalf and Harry and A.J. Brown and probably Hakeem Butler. So they're digging a little bit deeper, and but they can do that in this class. It's a deep class. So even if they wait until the 3rd to grab one of those wide receivers, we're still talking about a quality prospect.
Yeah, we're talking about a quality prospect. And if you are a believer in Sam Darnold or think there's the potential for him to gain value, there is a path to playing time for a young player, despite the depth chart with Anderson and Crowder and Enunwa and on and on and on. Let's move on to the AFC North. We'll start in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. Roethlisberger at quarterback, James Conner and Jalen Samuels seem to be pretty solid, or their roles seem to be pretty solid in Pittsburgh. Juju, James Washington, Dante Moncrief, maybe a little bit more room for another receiver in Pittsburgh. They seem to like to draft a receiver every year. And then Vance McDonald at tight end. I would say wide receiver is the biggest need, probably the biggest chance at an impact immediately for a rookie, Ryan. The Steelers pick 20th in this year's draft. They have that pick in each round. And then have an additional 3rd round pick, a high 3rd, thanks to the Antonio Brown trade, and an additional 5th round pick. What are our thoughts about Pittsburgh and the potential for a playmaker to end up there?
Yeah, it's got to be the wide receiver position that we focus on there. And I know some are maybe worried about Juju as a wide receiver 1 in that offense. I'm obviously not one of those, a big fan of his, but I don't think they're necessarily ready to hand James Washington the number 2 job. He's been kind of a hot name in Dynasty this offseason as a result of this whole ordeal. And I still like him as a player to target in Dynasty. But yeah, they're certainly going to add a wide receiver. And they did sign Dante Moncrief, who I like as well. So I think that maybe takes a little of the pressure off as far as using maybe that 1st rounder on a wide receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. But whether it's in the 2nd round, a couple of those 3rd round picks, as you mentioned, they'll add a wide receiver, probably a bigger wide out. And again, that's going to be a hot target for Dynasty owners.
Yeah, wide receiver for sure, but I do think those top 3 are solid. So I think, like you said, I don't think it's going to happen in the 1st round. I do think a tight end in the 1st round is on in play at least. Vance McDonald, of course, is there. Everybody's excited about this year, but we know the story with Vance McDonald. He can't stay healthy, never really has throughout his career. has certainly been productive with them when he's been on the field, but there's literally nothing behind him, but unless you're so excited about Bucky Hodges. So I think that's a great spot for Hockenson. And for some reason, if he fell that far, Fant, maybe not as much, maybe if they want to reach for Irv Smith, probably not in the first round, but I think tight end is something we should look for the Steelers as well.
Yep. Yeah, the Steelers have so many needs on their on the defensive side of the ball that I would expect that first round pick to go on that side, either a linebacker or a front seven guy, maybe even a corner, because they got some guys coming up on the end of their contracts as well. So not necessarily thinking it's going to be a first round pick that we get as dynasty owners, but definitely the potential on the second day of the draft. Let's go to Cleveland. And for the first time in a long time, I think it's pretty easy to say that Cleveland isn't a very good landing spot for potential playmakers for us in Dynasty, Matt. Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, the list kind of goes on and on. There's not a lot of room for touches in that offense, and that doesn't spell a quality landing spot for dynasty owners. No,
this is probably going to be a pretty boring draft from a skill position standpoint for what we care for fantasy for the Browns. But I bet they load up on, they traded the offensive lineman away. So maybe it's an offensive line and defensive draft for those guys. Maybe a third receiver, depending on how they feel about Callaway or Ratley. Rashard Higgins, I guess, is that third guy behind Beckham and Landry. But so I think there's some room maybe for a third wide receiver, but that's about it, I think, from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually Cleveland is the team we're avoiding because we just want nothing to do with that roster. And things have certainly changed. It feels like quickly. If you're a Browns fan, it probably doesn't feel so quick. But you have to love what you see with this roster. And I guess when it comes to the moves they might make on draft weekend here in a few weeks, a couple weeks, the one I'm most looking forward to is seeing what they do with Duke Johnson if they do end up trading him.
Right, and if they do end up trading Duke Johnson, is there the potential for a new role to open up? It doesn't seem likely with Chubb and Hunt there, and then also how much does Duke Johnson's value change depending on where he ends up? Let's go to the Baltimore Ravens. Guys, Lamar Jackson entrenched as their starter. They did some work at running back, adding Mark Ingram, so that seems locked up. Not necessarily the great landing spot that we thought there was the potential for it to be just a few weeks ago. Willie Snead right now penciled in as a wide receiver one. I'm not sure, despite the need at the position, if we can get too excited about a wide receiver landing in Baltimore, though, because of the quarterback and how he plays and maybe the lack of accuracy and downfield throwing in Baltimore. And I doubt anybody's going to list tight end as a need for the Ravens with Ozzie Newsome drafting one or two every year. Ryan, let's go back to you. What are your thoughts on Baltimore as a landing spot for our dynasty rookies?
Again, it's all about the receiver position. We kind of linked them with Buffalo because it's a similar story. The difference, I guess, is that Buffalo went out and signed a couple of receivers for their inaccurate young quarterback, and the Ravens did not. This is, when you look at this depth chart, it's one of the ugliest I've ever seen from a receiver perspective. You talked about Snead, but it's Chris Moore and Jaleel Scott. They did sign Seth Roberts from the Raiders, and they need to draft maybe 3 wide receivers, and they don't necessarily have a ton of draft capital. They don't have a second round pick, so they're going to draft a wide receiver probably in that first round with that 22 overall. It's just not going to be a player I want. I'm just kind of on pins and needles hoping my favorite wideout does not end up there.
I think you're actually kind of safe in the first round, Ryan. I know that's been popular, and as you look at mocks, it's almost trendy or commonplace now to have a wide receiver slid in there at 22. First of all, because they don't have that second round pick, there's probably a good chance they move back a little bit, try to collect extra picks, even though they got an extra third round pick and I think an extra fourth round pick I have written down here as well. We got to remember also they lost their entire pass rush over the offseason as well. And that's a big, big need for the Baltimore Ravens. So I would be surprised if they didn't try to add a pass rusher at the top of the draft, which would help us all, because I, like you, am not very excited about the prospect of one of my favorite wide receivers ending up in Baltimore in the first round. Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I'm not excited about it, but we also kind of need it to happen for Lamar Jackson's development. That's why the only reason why I'm rooting for a first round wide receiver there is we need weapons to help out Lamar. I was talking on a podcast a little bit earlier today about Lamar Jackson, and I know he was not great from a fantasy standpoint. He was fine though. I mean, he was quarterback 7 from weeks 11 to 17 last year. He finished no worse than quarterback 16. 4 of 6 weeks he finished as a quarterback 1, and this is without anybody to throw it to and without really being able to throw it. So I really hope they get somebody, if not in the first round, in the third, maybe Arcega-Whiteside or Kelvin Harmon, maybe even could fall to him in the third round and help him out. So I know we're not excited about this landing spot for our receivers, but I am excited about it in terms of Lamar Jackson's development. So I hope it happens. I hope it's not my favorite wide receiver, like Ryan said, but I hope they really do get a good one to help out Lamar.
Yeah, that's a good point. It would help out Jackson's owners for sure. Let's go to Cincinnati with the Bengals. Running back is covered. Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard seemed entrenched there. Wide receiver seems relatively solid with AJ Green at the 1 and Tyler Boyd at the 2. After that, maybe some question marks, but the speedy John Ross is on the roster as well. Tight end, there are definitely questions about. Tyler Eifert can't stay healthy. And then rumblings out of Cincinnati that they're looking at quarterbacks and maybe somebody to take over for, or at least compete with Andy Dalton at some point, whether that be early or late in the draft. Matt, what are your thoughts about Cincinnati and the potential for a dynasty playmaker to land with the Bengals?
This seems like kind of a dead zone too, honestly, unless they're going to grab a quarterback. I don't think they're going to do that in the first, right? They feel pretty safe at running back. Wide receiver feels pretty like they're pretty set there with Boyd. And if Ross is going to continue to develop, maybe they don't believe in Ross anymore. And that's where they spend their capital there. Tight end, of course, I think is an option. They just have Uzoma and Eifert and his, Frankenstein knees. So I think tight end is maybe a likely spot if they're going to go skill position in the first round and grab one of these top guys. But otherwise, other than the outside chance of a wide receiver 3 and a tight end, I don't see a whole lot of exciting skill position players that we care about in Dynasty going to Cincinnati. If
there's anything to be excited about, Ryan, when it comes to Cincinnati, is that the coaching change created this dynamic that you think, oh, this coach, Zach Taylor, comes over from Los Angeles and that Rams system, and they like to add playmakers and have unique formations and really give defenses exotic looks and get their playmakers the ball in open space. The Rams regularly add talent to that offense, even when we may not think that that's necessary. So if Taylor decides to do that with Cincinnati, is there the potential for the same type of thing there to happen down the line? And should we be looking at that as dynasty owners?
I think the question, and maybe this will be answered once we actually get to the draft. I'm not sure that we know at this point is who's really making the personnel, the draft decisions there, because Cincinnati has under the Brown family has earned a reputation of name brand drafting, basically drafting players that everybody has heard of. And it's been talked about a lot and pretty well documented that they have the smallest scouting department in the league. This is just an area they fail at basically year in and year out. And they're drafting guys that are on the front of magazines or high up in, Mel Kiper's rankings, which is just ludicrous when you think about it. So with that in mind, and with other reports that we've heard about Dwayne Haskins potentially falling, I think we could see them take Dwayne Haskins if he falls to 11. Not only would that fall under that name brand drafting, there is the question at quarterback. Haskins is an Ohio State kid. I think that would, they would think about from a selling ticket perspective that would be a win. I just don't give them much credit for anything from the personnel standpoint. I really hope it's Taylor that gets to make these calls, but I kind of doubt that happens.
So let's run with that just a little bit. Let's say Haskins lands in Cincinnati. What does that do to his value, Ryan, in Superflex leagues?
I think his value is already falling a little bit in Superflex leagues. If you just think about the perceived value pre-draft and the questions that are leaking out about him, if he were to be drafted to the Bengals, and if we assume that they're going to give Dalton one more year and then hand things off to Haskins, I would think his value would continue to fall, but maybe make him a good buy at that point.
Okay, with that, let's move on to the AFC South. We'll go with the Houston Texans to start here. Deshaun Watson, Lamar Miller, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. Nice core here, Matt. If you had to choose a position as a dynasty owner that you'd like to see added in Houston for Deshaun Watson, what would it be?
I think definitely running back. And again, I don't think it's happening in the first round, but give me Miles Sanders to Houston. I like that quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
And like the second or third round, probably third round, I would guess maybe. But something like that there. I'm not a Foreman believer, never have been. I know he's now going to be a year removed from that Achilles injury, but I don't know. Maybe he plays a role, but I really think that running back is the prime spot here. Tight end also always kind of an issue for the Texans. Jordan Thomas kind of came on last year. They drafted Akins last year. Ryan Griffin is always hanging around, but they haven't really been able to find an answer to that position since Zach Miller left them, right? So I think those are the two spots we're looking for. Maybe they add a wide receiver, if we can't trust Fuller's health. But I think running back is the position I want to look for these guys.
Yeah, and they may have already done that at wide receiver with Kiki Cutie as well. I think they have high hopes for him. I like what you said there about running back in the second or third round. They, of course, have that extra second-round pick to go along with theirs. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Matt. I think running back would be the spot they should target, and they're in a good position that they still have Miller that they can rely on as their starter for this season. So that gives them a little freedom to gamble on a running back, maybe even later in the draft. They tried to do that with Foreman. I don't think it's worked out, and I'm not sure it's just the injury that he has to blame. I kind of just get the feeling they might be ready to move on and try to replace him. So I certainly think they'll add a running back. When we look at that tight end depth chart, yeah, I agree with Matt. It looks like they need to add someone there. This is a good class that you feel like they probably could add someone, but they drafted 2 rookies last year. And as much as fantasy and dynasty owners don't like it, they seem pretty content with that tight end depth chart. I think they might just roll with that.
Let's go on to the Indianapolis Colts guys. The Colts have done a lot of work to this roster, and it's looking formidable. If there's a hole, it's maybe at that second wide receiver spot. They added Devin Funchess to complement T.Y. Hilton, but there's definitely potential for a guy to take over a role and develop with Andrew Luck. Running back, there were all those rumors about them adding a free agent potentially. They stayed away from that, but rolling with Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines, the potential to add another running back to that mix as well. Ryan, what do you think about Indianapolis as a landing spot, especially for receiver and running back?
I think they're in a great spot, first of all, with the moves they've already made over the past 2 years. They've pretty quickly rebuilt that roster with draft picks and taking a chance on guys like Ebron and Funchess, who most other teams had given up on. Signing Funchess looks really smart, as much as fantasy owners want to hate on him, and probably deservedly so, but that gives them some flexibility in the draft. They don't necessarily have to add that wide out early, but they do have they have 3 picks in the top 60, 2 in the top 35. So we'll see them add a wide receiver, and that wide receiver will then become a really top target, I think, in rookie drafts.
Dane Brugler put out his 7th round mock draft today on Tuesday or Monday. We're recording, and he has AJ Brown there. And listen, I know we want him on the Packers, Dan, but AJ Brown to the Colts, that sounds pretty fantastic, like a match made in heaven. They have those two they have the big guy and Funchess on the outside, and of course T.Y. Hilton providing the speed element, but they lack that slot receiver, and I think Brown could come in there and just crush. So I'm kind of in love with that pick now. I think wide receiver is the spot they should go, if not in the first round, relatively early. I'm still on Marlon Mack's side. I think he is a true bell cow if they need him to be, with of course Hines providing the receptions out of the backfield primarily, and can do some spot starting too if they need him to. So I think running back is probably a little lower on the list for me personally for this team, but I do think they add somebody. You have to can't forget about last year's preseason star Jordan Wilkins either, right? So he's there as their third running back, but I think wide receiver is where I'd like to see them to go early.
Oh, I think wide receiver to Indianapolis is one of the top potential landing spots in the first round. And that for opening night of the draft, that's one of the things that dynasty owners everywhere should be looking. So AJ Brown lands there, Matt. How high is he in your rankings? Not knowing other.
In a super flex, he's 102. In a standard one quarterback, I think he's 101 there.
Nice. Let's go to Jacksonville. I don't think we're going to find any 101s down there. Nick Foles at quarterback, Fournette at running back, just a group of guys at wide receiver with Marquise Lee and D.D. Westbrook and DJ Chark, and now Chris Conley, of course. Tight end is a mess for the Jaguars as well. You could see him really going anywhere here, Matt. Is there a spot you'd like to see him go for our dynasty rosters?
No, just stay away. I feel about this one as you guys, kind of like you guys felt about Baltimore, to be honest with you. I guess, though, I have a more volume of wide receivers that have been drafted relatively highly over the past several years. But, man, I don't know. Like, do they believe in Fournette? Are they going to draft somebody to be that? I kind of think more they're going to kind of try to replace TJ Yeldon there in terms of the pass catching running back role. Alfred Blue, I think, was signed to be the backup. So to Fournette for the early down work, but maybe a guy like Darrell Henderson or something lands up there to give him some speed, something like that. I guess would be but really, I just hope they avoid this.
Yeah, this is another team that I'm not anxious to invest in, but I don't know. You look at that wide receiver group.
Thank you, Bentley.
Bentley has a lot to say about the Jacksonville wide receiver group.
They're all dogs.
Easter egg.
Okay, I think he's done. You look at that wide receiver group, and Dan, you mentioned this. They've invested some fairly high picks, second and third rounders in these guys, Lee and DJ Chark especially, and recently signed Chris Conley. But all you really have is a handful of wide receiver threes. None of those, you don't feel good about any of those guys as your top target for your new quarterback that you just overpaid. So I kind of like Fournette as a buy low. I kind of like even Marquise Lee coming off that injury as a buy low, but in general, this is a team I want to avoid.
Yeah, and another team with 4 of the top 100 picks, 3 picks in the top 70. There's the potential for them to add a position player and potentially, we'll have to make some decisions based on that. Like you guys, I'm not necessarily excited about that potential or how quickly that guy can get enthralled in that offense and become a playmaker for us as dynasty owners. Maybe
tight end, Dan. I know they signed Swaim, but Foles has had some success with Ertz, so maybe they go early there. But again, I think if Fant lives there, I'll cry. On draft night, if Fant lands in Jacksonville, I'm going to cry.
I would as well. Glass half full, you're right. Tight end is a need for them, and that guy could make an impact right away. Like you, if Fant ends up there, I'm going to walk away from the TV slowly. Let's go to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans have a pick in each of the first 6 rounds. They've done a little bit of moving and shaking in the offseason, adding Adam Humphries and a backup quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. Of course, have Derrick Henry and Deion Lewis is still on the roster there in Tennessee. Corey Davis, I think we can all say he's disappointed to this point. Delaney Walker and Jonnu Smith at tight end. There's a bunch of guys on this roster, and certainly noteworthy guys, but not necessarily big-time playmakers. Ryan, what are your thoughts about the Titans and the potential to add a playmaker for us dynasty owners in Tennessee?
It's really just a frustrating collection of talent that they've assembled because, you look at Marcus Mariota, obviously they spent an early pick on him. Dynasty owners did as well, at least in Superflex leagues. Similar story with Derrick Henry, with Corey Davis. These are all guys that have, over the past few years, have carried quite a bit of value, but for the most part, they've never lived up to expectations. And you just have to wonder if they are ever going to, specifically referring to Mariota and Corey Davis. Henry, of course, came on very strong the last month of the season. And now they're saying they want to build their team around him, which really is just crazy when you think about it. I think there's room to add a wide receiver. I still like Taywan Taylor as I guess he's kind of become a shot in the dark at this point, but still kind of a fan favorite of mine. I think there is room to make a move at tight end with this team. Unfortunately, I'm starting to give up on Jonnu Smith as well. And when you look at the running back position, I'm a little surprised Dion Lewis is still on this roster.
I'm going to pose this question back at you guys. What if they draft one of these upper echelon wide receivers that we think are going to go in the first round? Does he? What happens to Corey Davis? First of all, does he become the number 2 and one of these rookies that is actually more talented than Corey Davis, or do you think they come in as a number 2? And I'll throw out my idea for this team at the wide receiver position. That's a guy like Paris Campbell. They have the possession guy or whatever you want. Uh-oh. What happened? I'm hearing myself.
Ryan switched headphones.
So
you got a little.
Hello?
Yeah, you heard yourself through his speakers for a second.
I got tripped out.
He switched headphones.
Sorry.
It's okay. Can you hear everything now?
That's all right.
Yeah, I could hear
Go
you.
for him. I'm going to throw out my.
All right, so I'm going to throw out my idea for this team, and that's Paris Campbell. I think that they have some guys there at the wide receiver position, but I think Campbell could really fit in and really kind of his skill set could kind of mesh with what Mariota does. Lots of rollouts, some quick targets there for him to be able to use that speed to gain yards with his after the catch ability. I know they have that a little bit with Taylor and I guess Humphreys from the slot, but I don't really think those guys can compete with a guy like Campbell in terms of the speed situation. But I guess my question again for you guys, throw it back at you, is what happens to Davis if they do draft, say, for some reason they draft DK or N'Keal Harry or one of these guys that we think are going to go early in the draft?
Obviously the more popular opinion of those that put out mocks is of the position players is to land a tight end there. So I don't know how likely it is that they would go wide receiver in round 1 or maybe even round 2 because they have needs on defense as well. I would be heartbroken, almost to the same extent as what we were just talking about with tight end in Jacksonville. Simply because I'm not a believer in Marcus Mariota and his ability to get the football to good players. And we've seen it with Corey Davis. I think that is a direct correlation of the lack of quarterback talent on the roster, not just with Mariota, but obviously the lack of backup talent that they've had over the last few years with Mariota banged up. Now, maybe that's just because Marcus has been banged up so much and it's affected his play so much. And there's talk about how he can't grip a football correctly or that his arm hurts when he throws and all those things. Maybe that all gets corrected and he returns to the prospect or that potential that we thought he had coming out of college. But I'm just not excited about any position player ending up with Marcus Mariota throwing him the football.
Do you think this year, 2019, is Mariota's last chance?
Absolutely. It should be.
Yeah. Well, he was essentially benched for Blaine Gabbert last year at one point in the season. And now they bring in Ryan Tannehill, which, say what you will about him. That's a relatively high profile backup that you're bringing in, insurance policy. And I don't think they would view Tannehill as the quarterback of the future 2020 and beyond. But if Mariota can't get it together this year, I think they're drafting Justin Herbert or Tua or Jake Fromm or whoever it might be next year.
Yeah, this is this last year, right? This is year 5. They picked up his 5th year of his contract. So I mean, this is the year that Mariota has to perform, or he's probably gone. So
right, and to be fair, we should say again, they've blamed a lot of that, or at least associated a lot of those struggles with injuries in the past. But that's part of being a good football player, and something that we have to take into account when valuing these guys. He's dinged up a lot, and if that's affecting his play to this extent, that it's knocked him down from, at one point being a fringe top 5 quarterback in our rankings on DLF to all the way down in the mid-teens, even lower than that for some. That's just an excuse for me. It's happened for too long. It already has happened for too long for me. Let's move on to the AFC West, guys, and we're going to start with the class of the West with the Kansas City Chiefs. Nothing to say about the quarterback position there, so we'll just breeze right by that. Tight end seems to be set with Travis Kelce already there. Could have said the same about wide receiver with Tyreek Hill there, as well as Sammy Watkins, but with the question marks surrounding Hill and maybe some of that off the field stuff that could perk up its head at any point, there's some room for another wide receiver there. Running back seems like the place to be, though, Matt. How high could a running back move up dynasty rankings if they landed in Kansas City?
I mean, this is the prime spot, right? Like, I understand the love for Damian Williams right now. I don't really necessarily think they're going to spend a high pick on a running back, but if they do, then I think this is he could be the 101 if we're not talking Superflex. I think Superflex, Kyler Murray's probably still that guy, but if the wide receivers all land in a bad spot and these guys, they get somebody like a Darrell Henderson, a Miles Sanders, obviously, of course, they're not going to get Josh Jacobs. But if one of these guys do land there, I do think it's probably the prime spot.
Even more than the off the field stuff, Ryan, with Tyreek Hill, the rumors that there were talks of maybe a trade or that maybe Hill could have, been talked about in a potential trade makes me think twice about what Kansas City's plans are, or what they might think of that offense, what they might be trying to add to that offense. Maybe somebody to compete with Hill or to potentially take over that role at some point. What are your thoughts about Kansas City as a landing spot?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think their focus among these 4 positions has to be at wide receiver, not only because of the Hill story, but also just the lack of depth. I mean, Sammy Watkins is another guy who has never been able to stay healthy. They did lose Chris Conley as well, so they've got some questions when it comes to just their depth at wide receiver. Even if Hill comes through all this with with no further trouble, so they're going to add a wide receiver. And again, if it's one of these guys that we're talking about as potential first or second round dynasty picks, they're going to gain some quick value.
Another team that seems to be set throughout the depth chart, or at least the depth chart that we care about in dynasty, is the Los Angeles Chargers. Phillip Rivers at quarterback, Melvin Gordon at running back, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, Travis Benjamin at wide receiver, and tight end with Hunter Henry. They have a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball, also the offensive line, fellas. So I could see them ignoring all the positions. Maybe they add a running back late in the draft, maybe another wide receiver to make up for the losses there. But overall, we shouldn't expect much, Ryan.
No, this is a roster that's in pretty good shape among these 4 positions, and they have to feel pretty good that they're going to be able just to basically draft depth. Antonio Gates, I think we can finally assume he's gone. So maybe adding another tight end, adding another receiver with Tyrell Williams gone. Maybe they choose this time to draft the young quarterback like we were talking about with the Patriots. But they also added Tyrod Taylor, so that gives them a little insurance. That they're sitting pretty, that they don't have any major needs right now.
I think quarterback is something to look at. I know they added Tyrod Taylor as the backup, but obviously not the long-term answer. So maybe they're a dark horse to draft one of these a little bit later. Not too late quarterbacks. Again, I think this is a good spot for Will Grier, a guy with a similar fiery attitude on the field as Rivers. So maybe that's a good learning spot for him. And Melvin Gordon is, maybe they decide they don't want to pay him for some reason. I think they will, but if they decide they don't want to give him a bunch of money, then maybe he's going to move on, and they do need a running back here. So I think quarterback and running back are the two that I'm going to be looking for the Chargers.
Another team that is in need of a young quarterback is the Denver Broncos, maybe even as high as 10 overall. They hold that 10th pick. Joe Flacco at quarterback for now, at least. Running back seems to be okay with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. Wide receiver after Emmanuel Sanders, who's coming off for the injury, and Cortland Sutton. There's some questions there. And then tight end, they've tried a couple times with Big Ten tight ends over the last few years with Jeff Hireman and Jake Butt, but there's not a pass catcher necessarily in that group. Obviously, there's a chance for a pass catcher to make an impact relatively early, but with Joe Flacco at quarterback, are we that excited about this one, Matt?
No, but doesn't it just seem so perfect at this point? I know obviously that's all the talk right now is that Drew Lock is going to the Broncos at 10, but it just makes so much sense because they're like the same quarterback. They're both giant men with giant arms and not a lot of nuance to their throwing ability. It just makes a lot of sense. So that seems like a almost like a locked in as much as anything can be at this point. And then you're right, at wide receiver, they have Deshaun Hamilton, which I do like quite a bit, but I don't think that I know they're going to keep Sanders around, but I come at 30-year-old, was he 31 or 32 coming off of an Achilles injury? That just sounds real bad. So I think they will add somebody there, maybe not highly. But I think that quarterback is definitely happening. And then at tight end, I know they drafted Fumagalli last year and Jake Butt the year before that, and they re-signed Hireman. But seems like a spot where they could add a body if they want to add, some physical talent to that offense at the tight end position. Running back, I think, is pretty set unless they are ready to move on from Booker and want some depth behind Lindsay and Freeman. Or maybe Lindsay isn't going to be ready. I think there's some news that he's not going to be ready for OTA, so maybe they need to add somebody there just as some depth.
Yeah, this is a team that kind of feels like it needs everything, maybe except running back. Certainly can use some help at wide receiver. Dynasty owners might be ready to presume that Sutton is going to serve as the team's wide receiver one, and he's certainly the most talented, healthy receiver on that team. But I'm not sure he's ready. We didn't see enough of him from last season for me to be convinced. So this is just another pretty gross roster for me.
Yeah, we're hoping for a big jump from Sutton, but like you said, nothing from his rookie season suggests that is going to happen. And then, the move at quarterback isn't a big move up if it's a move up at all. So lots of questions to be answered in Denver. I don't think anybody's value goes up drastically by being drafted by the Broncos. Let's go out to Oakland for the last team of this week's episode with the Raiders. Quarterback, Derek Carr. Running back, they signed Isaiah Crowell and have Richard and Washington and Warren on the roster as well. Antonio Brown and Terrell Williams at wide receiver, and they definitely have a need at tight end. Looking at their draft picks, Ryan, they have plenty of them. Of course, with those trades that they made, they picked 3 times in the first round and then have an early second round pick as well. What are your thoughts about somebody landing in Oakland, and how much can they move up draft boards just by landing there?
I don't think it's really going to help any position player to land in Oakland. They certainly need a tight end, but even if that's a guy like Fant or Hawkinson or Smith, I'm not going to view that as a quality landing spot, honestly, even with the wide open path to playing time. I think even with the addition of Isaiah Crowell, they probably still draft a running back. They've been pretty routinely linked to Josh Jacobs in mock drafts. So I think people are almost just starting to accept that at this point. In many ways, this team reminds me of the Bengals because they have that quarterback who has underwhelmed, and maybe this is the year where they make the move and they draft the rookie quarterback.
That's what I was going to say too. I mean, unless we really think that Gruden is happy with Carr, I know they're paying him a lot of money, but it seems like they're pulling these guys in. They're pulling Murray in for workouts and things like that. So it seems like a little bit of an underrated spot for one of these quarterbacks to land. Tight end, obviously a need, maybe a wide receiver 3. I guess if Jacobs goes there, that's fine, but he seems a little bit buried unless they're just going to, completely ignore the Crowell signing, which is certainly possible. And then we still don't know what's happening with Marshawn Lynch. So they could really just draft anybody and, it's going to be a need for them.
And again, it doesn't move the needle much in Dynasty. In fact, if anything, it may move it backwards a little bit. I don't know if landing in the black hole is going to be a good thing for Dynasty prospect. At least one of those top guys that we're excited about. And unfortunately, the Raiders have 4 shots really in the top 40 picks at landing one or more of those guys, unless they package them all up to go get that quarterback, which has been rumored as well. We're going to do the same thing again next week, but we're going to flip over to the NFC depth chart side of things. We'll cover each of those teams just as we did this week for Ryan and Matt. I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to the DLF Dynasty Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
I got a message. Recorded audio was lost at labeled locations.
Super.
Shut up.
I'm dead serious. Possible causes. Other applications are competing with Audacity for processor time. You are saving directly to a slow external storage device. Well, that's not the case.
You're not saving to an external storage device?
Nope.
Well, I guess last week's episode is going to be this week's episode.
Oh, we
we'll
got
just
that.
start again.
We got the backup.
Actually, have
yeah.
her edit our stuff and just leave a space and you re-record your stuff.
I'm okay with that.
Well, it says marked areas, so I'm looking to see where the marked areas are and how
Only the spots you were talking.
big they are. I don't know what the heck happened.
What number is this? 353?
Yes, sir.
Oh, there's one.
Was it when you took your headphones out for some reason?
I think it was.
Because that's when I heard my playback.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we'll see what happens.
Let the editor figure it out, right?
That's right.
Well, she gets
That's right. Huge. What is it?
353.
353. Who did we talk about the most this week? Should probably put a rookie on there. A.J. Brown.
Do it. In this Brugler mock, Dan, he has Paris Campbell to the Packers.
I don't hate that.
I don't either. I took him at 104.
Especially with the new coaching staff.
In this thread we're doing, this mock we're doing based on the mock on Twitter.
You took him at 104?
Yeah. But you haven't seen the other landing spots. The landing spots are terrible.
You took him at 104, not 204?
1.04.
1.04. Hey.
So Murray went first. So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to ask something else. Go ahead.
No, I was saying.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Murray went first to the Cardinals. So he went 101 overall in the
super
mock.
flex.
Super flex. Okay. Then 102 was A.J. Brown to the Colts. 103 Josh Jacobs, who went to the Bucks.
Ooh.
And then I took Paris Campbell to the Packers. The other options, DK Metcalf to the Redskins, which I'm not excited about. In the first round, the 2 tight ends went. No other skill positions went in the first round of this mock. Second round, N'Keal Harry to the Jaguars. No thanks. Hakeem Butler to the Panthers. Irv Smith to the Patriots. Isabella to the Chiefs. Debo to the Saints. Marquise Brown to the Niners. So for me, I think Campbell jumps up to the second wide receiver. And that's
when was he picked? When was Campbell picked according to that?
Campbell at the 30th pick.
Oh,
I picked him in the rookie.
So A.J. Brown went after Campbell?
No. AJ Brown went at 26 for
Oh.
Colts and 102 in the mock.
Oh.
Anyway, I shared that with you guys if you wanted to take a look. Dan, any thoughts on improving this RFA auction for Red List?
Well, I like the idea of the auction. Is it popular? Is it something you came up with or heard about or what?
I started it like 3 years ago in a home league, and then 2 years ago I started in Red List 1, and then this is the first time for here. And the very first time I ran, the rules have changed every single time I've done it. I've been trying to tweak it. So like the first year I required a restocking fee. So like hopefully to encourage, people to nominate at a reasonable price. So if the player didn't sell, they got charged like 10% or whatever it was from their rookie budget. So all that did though was make it so only I think 2 or 3 teams out of the 12 nominated. So that
what about requiring the nomination?
That's definitely going to happen in the future because at least one you have the option of 2.
I think you should be required to put both. If you're going to have it, make it something that's exciting. Yeah. And then I kind of think that you could maybe even require you probably couldn't do that.
One guy threw out the idea of requiring everybody to start at $1 bids, and then once an auction is won, that owner has a short time window to decide if they want to accept.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. So the problem is you're going to see huge names out there, and everybody pulled back.
That's my fear for it. So I want there to be some kind of penalty involved, but not one that's going to cause people to not want to nominate at all. You know what I mean?
Well, first you require they nominate.
Yeah, that is a huge thing, and a massive penalty for not nominating.
Okay, I like that.
Like if you don't nominate, you lose a quarter of your rookie dollars.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Half of your rookie bucks.
Yep, I like that.
And if you don't have any already, you lose all of it for next year already. Bang.
So require start, and then everybody starts at $1, and then you have the decision at the end.
I don't think that's necessary. I kind of liked the reserve auction.
You just have to have people be smarter with their prices, because again, if you require it, and
maybe something that would give a benefit to an owner that puts a low. Like how about a certain amount of rookie money you get added to your pool, to your allotment if you have the player that went up the most amount of dollars. That's just whoever the most is. So Sony Michel started at $1 and went to 400. He was the most. He gets the extra $50.
That's too much, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't know. That's not too much.
That's 50 is like a mid 3rd round pick or a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, that's what I was going off of. Give him a 3rd round pick. We give away a 2nd rounder for just for winning the. That would give people a reason to nominate good players for low amounts.
That's true.
You would get multiple good players if you're giving away $50.
Yeah, that's true.
If that's the goal, I think that's what it takes. If it's 20, you're not going to get.
I think the goal is
care enough about $20.
To me, the goal is to have more than 5 out of 36 teams sell a player. Like if I could get
hey, we were one of them, Ryan.
I don't even. You did it. You sold freaking Greg Olsen somehow.
I don't know how we did it.
Me either.
That guy's that's another moron. I mean, we're killing it on morons in that league.
3